Everybody, it's Lee Foster here of Revitalise Connecting People, and welcome to this week's Live at 5 on LinkedIn Live and also on the Revitalise Networking YouTube channel. As you're all probably aware by now, is that once a week I get the great opportunity to host Revitalise Meets, the business-focused live podcast, and a chance for me to meet many of our global and local business connections and fellow RBC members to really delve into finding out more about their business, their challenges, their achievements, what they're looking for, and what are the next steps for success for them in general. And I've got the great pleasure to be welcome along for the first time to Revitalise Meets, one of our fellow members and prolific business owners who's always busy and keeping himself out of trouble and always busy helping people as many as he possibly can. The one and only Mr. Tony Gordon of Changing Your Mind Limited. Tony, how are you today?
Very good. Thanks, Lee. How about you?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm all the better for seeing you, my friend, with a lovely
Good.
backdrop of your beautiful back garden.
I
So, great,
wish it was. This is fake.
man. Tony, thanks for joining us today for this week's show. Can we start, first of all, by sort of taking a look at your business journey so far and, how long you've been going for and really why you started in the business of Changing Your Mind Limited?
Yes, good question. I'll give a bit of background to understand first why. For the 18 years before I started the business up, I worked for First Direct Bank, which people don't know is part of HSBC Group. Fantastic place to work. I had 18 wonderful years there. Coached a lot of staff, managers, different departments, sales, quality, everything. And I was also a mental health first aider for the bank as well. And I loved the job. I loved meeting the people. I loved working with the people. And I realised through a lot of that there was a lot of issues that people were going through that weren't necessarily to do with the work. It was to do with personal life and work and life. And it was that saying you always hear work-life balance. And it used to really annoy me because I didn't really believe such a thing exists as a work-life balance. And it's because people are people. You don't really get that balance. As I said, there's always something that's either on their mind or something they're having to deal with. And I found that for a lot of the time, what I was doing then was helping people outside the work. So when I was working with them's great, but maybe need a bit extra help that I couldn't do in there, I could help them outside. And I loved the coaching bit again. And I realised my job in there had changed. It was becoming more and more data than it was coaching. So I decided in 2021 there was redundancies coming up. Rather than going against the redundancy, I asked to take it. I think I was actually the first one to put in for it, the ones that were there. And it was because I just felt this was a great opportunity for me to leave and to work a lot more with people who needed that type of help. Ones who were in positions maybe in work, who were struggling in the position where they were they felt as though they enjoyed their work, but there was nothing, there was something missing. They wanted more. So maybe they were looking at getting a promotion to change in their own work, sometimes having to go sideways to get up an advancement the way they wanted, or possibly leaving their work. So I started off really being a career coach. And the ironic thing was, people keep saying about how did you get local your clients and that. My first client was Alberta, Canada. It wasn't actually even in the UK. It was through another coach who knew the lady that his son needed help. Again, it was the same thing. He'd left school, didn't know what he wanted to do with his life, was totally stuck, and he was getting a bit down, and the parents were a bit concerned about him. So it was just getting him on track. And it was brilliant. Just the feeling you get when you see the little light bulb going to somebody else's eyes, what he could achieve. Because it wasn't, I think a lot of time people are limited by other people's perspectives on them. They think too much of what other people think instead of what they want to do. They've got aspirations or dreams themselves, and they don't know how to get there. So that's what I realised. That's the bit I love doing, is getting someone to that point when that little light bulb goes off in their head, and they go, "Actually, I can do that, or I know how to do that." And all I do, I tell them, is guide them. I'm there literally just like a tourist guide. It's just to guide them to the right point when they realise themselves they can go on their own. They don't need somebody like me anymore. So it's been a cross between therapy and coaching, because a lot of the people that came to me for coaching were held back with something in the past. And I trained them both. So it was quite lucky that I say to people, we've got two things we have in life. We work away from pain or towards pleasure. And a lot of people who are stuck in jobs, are stuck in businesses that don't really work for them, it's because they're holding on to the pain from the past. But once you release that and they can start to see what they can do going forward, that's the amazing thing. So that's what I realised that I love doing, is working, especially that I've worked a lot with new business owners who've got a great idea, but then don't know what to do with it. So it's like a dream in their head. And until they can get it out their head and get it down on paper and we turn it into a plan, and then they can start seeing where they've got to go. So just getting them off to the first stages to there. So that's what I spent the last couple of years doing.
It's interesting though the way your path goes by somebody introducing you and having that conversation with that young chap
Yeah,
and bringing him through that sort of area of insight and inspiring to move forward, and especially the way that drifted you, not even drifted you away, guided you through. You're more of a guide, guiding
hmm,
other people through to where their potential is, what their successes want to be
yeah,
as well. And that must give you a real buzz, because coming from a banking background, but you've also got a team background there, so you've got like team leadership training, I guess, in there as well. That's what's
yeah.
maybe had a massive impact for you in that sort of business journey growth.
Yeah, the ironic thing was that I looked at the coaching that I did when I joined the bank. So they were fantastic at the training side, trained internally, but also allowed me to train externally. They paid for courses for me. So, for example, your area, Newcastle University, I trained positive impact coaching Newcastle University online. I just had to have people in my work who would allow me to be sort of like they were like the guinea pigs. I could practice things on and then send it away. Then we did internal management training. So SVQs, they trained me up in that as well. So team manager, right up to departmental manager. I didn't do that role, but I was trained up to them. So I was there if things needed, but you could move into that. And I loved all that, that they were always backing you. If you wanted that and you pushed yourself, they would back you to do that. And that was brilliant. But yeah, it was when I started looking at the coaching side, the thing about that young guy that made it me was it turned out that it was because I could see something they didn't. And what I found out was that his mum and dad had split. And the problem for him was it wasn't so much the job, it was trying to find a job where he didn't feel he was letting one of the parents down. So
Right.
we might, because they lived in two different areas and he spent half the time with his mum and half the time with his dad, he was only 17, 18. So what we realised was, but you stretch yourself too far. Why don't you look for something in the middle? So that's what we did. We looked for jobs in the middle, some he wanted to do, and we found something right in the centre. So he could keep the thing he was worried about was affecting both by getting a job that was halfway between the two, which allowed him some nights to go and see his mum, some nights to go and see his dad straight after work, same amount of time. And that took us back to the bit I was saying earlier. Sometimes you have to work away from the pain to move towards it. Once we realised that that's what was holding him back, it wasn't laziness or that. Like his mum thought he can't find in, didn't want a job. It was nothing to do with that. It was the fact he couldn't tell them that he didn't want to hurt either parent's feelings.
Mm.
And a lot of the people I coach now, you realise that's what the problem is. There's always someone holding them. But what got me was when I was talking to somebody about it, and you just said the teamwork. Before I even started in the bank, I worked for a security firm in the Midlands, and I had a team of controllers, they were called. I was the controller manager. So I had controllers there, and the ones that used to go out and do mobile visits to people, contract managers. So I realised I've been doing it for about, it's how terrible this, over 28 years. I've really been coaching people without even realising that's what I was doing.
Yeah. It's interesting when you find, but it's also what you just mentioned there before, and that about the young chap and getting the balance right,
Hmm.
personal versus business, but also making sure they've got the balance right, because there's other cause and effects in their life that's causing that. Thanks for sharing that, Tony. Thank you. Over the time you've been doing that, and you're looking at 28 years, and then you come into the field of your own. Really, what's been the biggest challenge that you've approached, but also has that challenge turned into a phenomenal achievement for you? What's been that stage for you in that journey? What's been the biggest challenge was turned into an achievement?
There's a couple, but one personally was because I have an illness. We talked a little bit before that. I've had it since 2011. Um, People who I worked with in the back knew that I was pretty bad with illness because I was in the hospital all the time, always being operated on. In simple terms, I get recurring kidney infections. And if anybody's ever had one, they know how painful that is. But having them all the time was debilitating. And I always try to stay at work, but the pride thing, I think was the biggest. My big thing was that I kept trying to work through it, and all the time I ended up in times I was trying to work in my head when I would end up getting into a doctor's and everything. I was trying to avoid it to the end of the week because I knew their first reaction was send me to hospital. As soon as they knew the kidney infection was getting bad, because I'd lost one kidney because of it already, because of infection, so they would just send me straight to the hospital. I'd been there for a couple of days on a drip, and then come home and try and go back to work again. But what the achievement wasn't the fact that I kept going. It was the fact that I realised that that's what was causing a lot of the problems for me, was the fact that I was too stubborn. I was too proud, that I didn't want to let people down. So I tried to go back to work a lot of the time when I've got a manager who knows she is. Was very good at telling me that I wasn't actually the right to be back at work, even though I kept saying I was. But the bit that really got me was the achievement was realizing that I had to step back and listen to myself on body and one mind at times. And that was something that wasn't natural for me. Something from my generation who's brought up, especially male, that you don't, unless you're literally got broken legs or something like that, you cannot crawl to work, you go to work no matter what. And I was getting people telling me you shouldn't be here. I was actually getting into the door to work, walking in to sit at my desk and they told, no, you need to go. Or eventually said they can't send me home, but they're telling me you should not be here. And it was difficult for me to deal with that. But what I did was I set up a podcast, and on the back of some advice from a clinical psychologist, as a way of being a sort of therapy for me. And setting the podcast, I had to admit to people then I had a problem. And that was the biggest challenge for me, was leaving the bank when I had the security of all the people running about me all the time. And I know who always helped me, even though they might not realise it a lot, but they helped me a lot to keep focused, not let the pain get too much. Having to get my own and admit to people that I've got a problem, that was huge for me to be able to do that. And I did get some grief off the back of it about why did you make yourself so vulnerable? And what the achievement was is I realised that vulnerability was actually one of my biggest strengths, not a weakness. The vulnerability became the strength of the fact that I was not going to let that stop me. It was always driving me on. And you'll know, being a golfer, is that I have a set of golf clubs that sit in front of me all the time. And it was because one day I will play golf. Even though I've told probably this illness I wouldn't do that, I'll do it. I'll find a way and I'll play. And that was the personal achievement we was the fact of getting that resilience and realizing that actually all the things that I've always been told, be strong, be proud, oh, this was all wrong. Actually, the strongest part of me was actually turned around and said, I need help. I need some support from somewhere, and go on a journey to try and find that. And I think that was such a powerful thing for me because it's really helped me in the business, because it's let other people realize that when I tell them or give them ideas and things how they can change or what they do, it's come from someone who's actually been there, who's been through all this, been through the overwhelm. I've been through the fact I even broke down once as well, where it got overwhelmed for me, too much for me. And having to do that, but how to build my own resilience up to do it was having to give away, which I thought were my two biggest strengths. And that was my pride and my, I thought, adaptability for I could cope with it, but realizing they were actually also my worst enemies. And so that was a big thing. But professionally, it's really helped a lot because a lot of people heard that podcast, which I didn't realize. I thought I was just going to put it out. I just imagined talking to my dad on a blank screen, filmed it and sent it out, and I never listened to it until people kept saying to me, "You need to listen to what you said on that because it's quite profound." I went, one, I don't like hearing my own voice, and two, I don't think I would like to actually listen to what I said because it was just from my heart. It was nothing else. It was everything I felt just came out on that one episode. And that was one of the biggest things for me was realizing for people then is that if I can do that, so can other people. No matter what adversity you face, it's looking internally, first of all, and seeing how you need to do it for yourself and worry about externally, then you can face that. So I think that was the biggest challenge I've had. And also having to constantly deal with it and have your own business because there's nobody else I can fall back on. There is only me.
It's a good point you mentioned there as well. I mean, congratulations in what you've achieved in how you have dealt with it, but keep the focus and the drive, Tony, because that's one of the big testaments to yourself, really. And I think a lot of people out there, especially blokes, let's be honest here, right? We don't shout it out. We keep it inside. We're sometimes with our age group, we were drilled into that when you're many years ago just to get on with it and
Yep.
don't ask for help. Just move forward, just suck it up, get on with it, etc., and move forward. But there's also sometimes as business owners, and I don't know if you agree with this, we don't listen to our bodies. And that's when burnout usually happens. When we don't listen to it, a burnout happens.
Mhm.
Would you agree with that?
I was on a call about that earlier on today. Yeah, It's one of the hardest things to get through to a lot of guys, especially ladies, but a lot of people, not just guys, but a lot, especially males,
Yeah,
and especially males 45 to 55 or even above, is because, again, it falls back on that pride that you have to be the breadwinner. You're the one that has to go out all the time. You're there. And I walk about, still go to the pub, and I go out, and people still call me big man. And I felt really weird as getting called that, and yet I didn't feel that way because what I could see in myself wasn't, it was some weaker because the way I was, and realizing actually other people weren't seeing that. That was on my own head, the way I believed, because the way I was brought up. And I believe, yeah, that more and more, well, we'll come to it later when we talk about the business side, but one of the reasons I do what I do in the business side for leaders and that is to get more men to actually open up and realise that before they can move forward or sort their business issues out, they need to sort that side out. And it's such an important part that we were never taught. There is no rule book when you set a business up properly. There is nothing to say that you're going to have to deal with these things. And when you're suddenly your own boss and you're dealing with clients or staff, it's how you interact with them. It's how you learn to deal with those emotions. But if you can't deal with your own, there's no way you can do it with other people. You can't have that same communication. You can't build those relationships the same. So that's the big thing for them. You're right, is that people need to learn how to look at themselves inside, how to look at their own emotions, how to deal with emotions, but know the triggers. What is it that triggers you? That's what I learned to deal with. Was I knew what was causing the pain. I knew things that I was doing. You're right. I had to listen to myself, mind and body, say, it's tell me not. The one person that got me to realise this, and my wife will always remind me of this, was a GP. I'd had another doctor in the surgery, and she got one day and looked at my records. She said something about, I was there, and she said, I don't think we've done enough for you. We need to be doing more to help you. And 2 weeks later, she turned around and said, I don't trust you anymore. And I went, sorry? And she goes, I don't trust your judgment because you keep kind of here telling me you're okay. And if nothing else, I can just look at you and see you're not okay. And it was a real shock for somebody to tell me that and say, I don't trust you with that. And that was a big cut because trust is a big thing for me. Authenticity is a big thing for me. And she was right. I was pretending to be something I'm not. So how could I be authentic? I had to learn that about me. And that's the thing when you work with a lot of business owners, especially guys, get them to understand that for they want to be authentic and want that trust and respect from other people, they've got to do that to themselves first of all.
yeah. That's some good advice there to have. And I think it's working on yourself, taking time out. These are all things that we have to listen to. And again, I think it's great advice sometimes just to have an internal talk to yourself and
Hmm.
say, right, come on.
Yeah.
Um, thanks
If
for
you want to
sharing.
laugh at that, Bob, you're doing it
Yeah,
like I was doing that once, forgetting where I was, and I was sitting inside the surgery, but waiting to use one of the appointments, and I was
yeah.
doing that. I was actually talking from it in my head, and I must have said something out loud, and this guy was laughing. He went, "Do you realise you're talking to yourself?" I said, "No, that's all right. I'm just a solopreneur. I'm a self-employed." He went, "Yeah, what are you doing?" "I'm having a board meeting." He went, "Okay," and he just looked at me funny. "You what?" I don't know, but somebody once said that to me, and I thought it was a great one to catch you on.
I
So if I
love
said that out loud, I was just having a board meeting. I'm self-employed, so it was great fun.
I'll use that more when I'm running around the tracks on my own, sometimes with my headphones on. So brilliant. Thanks for sharing that. You talked before about having clients overseas, and you
Hmm.
talk about especially the way I talk a lot about this, but I always like to ask business owners, especially that word you just mentioned there, solopreneurs, right?
Hmm.
How have you adapted to work online? Do you have a good mix between virtual and in person? And are you combining both together, Tony?
Um, being honest, most people that know me say in person is my thing.
Yeah.
I love being in person. I love the buzz that I get off an audience. If I'm in a room with a group, it's the first couple of minutes building that rapport with them, that relationship for the rest of the session, whatever I'm doing. It just feeds off that. I feed off that for the whole lot. But yeah, having to learn that there's people all over this world that need help. It's not only people in my locality. So I would never turn them away wherever they are. And the thing is, you have to learn to adapt with time zones as well. So
Mm,
I've worked with someone from Australia, so I've been on at 7 in the morning to work with them. I've been on to the ones in the US, which can be anytime, usually over the morning or early afternoon. I work with them, and it depends. People forget there's two different sides of the US as well. You've got Eastern time and you've got Pacific time, and yeah, and I sometimes get them mixed up. Got to remember one I'm on with. So it's became such a big part of the business is being able to do both. But also, it's also if you work with companies, sometimes the staff are not all based in the UK. They've got staff in different offices abroad.
Yes.
So they may have something in the US, they've got something in Europe. And if you're working with them, then it depends if it's one-on-one or groups, but you have to adapt because you can't get to all of the people. And since COVID, it's became more apparent that there's a lot more people out the office than in at times. So really to have the proper service for staff, companies as well have to realise, yeah, they might have to do these sessions online. It's great when you go. I've done recently one the last week. I've had ones in my office there in a boardroom working, but it's because they're based in the same building, so it's easy for them to come down. When I've done larger last month, doing ones from Edinburgh, and based on the west coast there in Edinburgh side, it wasn't feasible to really get all them to come out to go somewhere when it's easier online. So we just do them online. I do it monthly online for them. So it's not just abroad; it's even in the UK. It's doing it for people to give them that choice. And if it's one-to-one clients, a lot of time they feel better if they're actually online because they're in their own environment. They're choosing where they want to have the conversation. And sometimes these can be difficult conversations to get people to move on. They have to face different things themselves. So having that privacy of somewhere that they feel comfortable is really important. So I think for most companies nowadays, you have to learn that we have to adapt. We have to be flexible with the hours if we do because I said the worldwide thing with time zones, but also having the hybrid side as an offer that people can do. And it's similar with courses. If I'm designing a course with somebody at the moment, and it's going to be part with me and part online for them to do, because they do that in between the sessions. So even that's having to adapt that you have to have both of them to be able to do that.
I think it's a good point you raised on that as well, and you mentioned it just in there. It was about confidence.
Yeah.
So I feel more confident being not in a room of people, but being just on an individual on a Zoom call.
Hmm.
And I think that has opened up the doors for many people now to sort of have that conversation and that chat with a bit of confidence as well. And I think that is so important. But also as well, I think when you think about the time zones, people forget about that.
Yeah.
And the way it's so easy now to actually jump online without traveling, click a button,
Hmm.
boom, you're there. You can travel the world in one day if you really want to online
Hmm.
by speaking to many, many people, depending on the time differences, etc. as well. So it's good to see you've embraced. Are you going to be keeping that adaptation with you for the foreseeable future? Do you feel like
Yeah.
it's going to be part and parcel of what your business
Yeah. I think
offering is?
the in-person ones would still be the main thing that I would do. That's what I love doing. But when you've got 20 people and a business who come from all over, it's more common sense as well to say to them, give them the option, do you want it online rather than having to travel somewhere? Because you've just mentioned that. The one thing COVID did really highlight to people is what a waste of time it was traveling to businesses every day, especially things. If you look at the ones, for example, Central London, I used to live down there. I'd be travelling for an hour and a half each day, going forward, going there and back again. 3 hours of a day. How much more productive could that be now if I was doing the same time at home? So
Correct.
it makes sense for people to look at that. You get a lot of companies say, "Oh, I don't know if people were saying, you don't know if you can trust people at home." You have to build that trust with your staff.
Yeah.
And if you do that, you will find they will be even more productive probably than they are because they're not having to go anywhere to a coffee machine and start talking to people. They're only at home. They want a coffee, they probably sit next door. Some people even in the kitchen. Just put their hand behind, get a coffee, there you go, back to work.
Yeah.
It's embracing these changes is what companies have to do, as well as people ourselves, is it's always about look at where's your client need, what do they want, what's the solution they're trying to find, and where would they have the best place to find that solution. So if it's online, that's the option. And there's all different places online. I know you discussed this before with Eddie, I think few weeks ago when you're done, saying about not necessarily Zoom, because there's Zoom, there's Meets, there's Teams, there's all different ones that you can have online. So people have got that option as well, or whatever they feel more comfortable with tech wise, as well as more comfortable in their own surroundings.
And you've also got LinkedIn now. I mean, that's one that's blown my mind now. You got your LinkedIn videos, but you can actually do meetings online with LinkedIn if you really want to as well. So
Yeah.
there's so many platforms to choose from to make it easier for you to get out and about and around. So good to hear that. Now, I always ask all my guests this every single week as well, and it's about the golden top three tips from your sector. And what we've spoken about off camera, and especially now being on camera, we talk about, from the emotional to motivational intelligence in
Hmm.
business. What would be your top three tips around those key areas that you would share with everybody who's online? And just to mention, we've got Richard Hagan who's just joined and put a smiley face on there. So it's nice to see a few people in the chat. And if you've got anything you'd like to ask Tony, that you hear, please put in the chat area for us as well. Thank you very much. Tony, just over to you about motivational intelligence and emotional intelligence. What would you share for your top 3 tips?
Yeah, first of all, for me, it's one of the biggest things that I found when I started to come out to coach in an open field rather than just in the bank I was. And that's how people seem to have one or the other. You hear people talking about they coach someone with emotional intelligence, making them more self-aware of things, and the other ones with motivational intelligence, working towards goal setting, helping the drivers that get them going. I don't believe that's right. For me, it's a combination of all of it. It doesn't exist. It's just my title is on it, but it's holistic leadership intelligence. I call it. It's because the fact of the the emotional side and the motivational side are both so important for business owners to have. It's understanding that I mentioned earlier, but understand themselves. So, from a more of an emotional intelligence sort of point of view, is understanding their own self awareness, their own emotions, feelings, and how they deal with that, their values, their interests. It helps them to develop skills that can inspire, they can motivate their teams, they create an engaging environment to work in, and it aligns with their own staff's motivations. And it's a great thing you can have these. The motivational one, that's motivational. Sorry, emotional would be like again the same. It's understanding emotions, manage and regulate the emotions of the staff, improved communication with the staff, improved relationship building. And I think for me, it's getting a combination of two of them. And the three things that I would say is understand what motivates your staff, understand what motivates every team member that you have. What are their values and beliefs, not just the companies? What are the things that drive them on? What are the things that they get out of bed for in the morning? Do they come to a job because people say because it's money? Do they come because they love the culture you've got, the environment? If you empathize with your staff and you understand their emotional state, it makes it so much better and they're so much more productive because they feel valued. So that's the first thing I'd say is understand the motivating factors for your staff, but create a vision that staff are included in. This is one of the things I think for me that falls down a lot when I hear companies talk about it, is they talk about a vision and they talk like maybe the leadership team or the hierarchy of a business. But a vision should include every single person in that business because you're all part of it. They should all be part of what your vision is, what your values are. They should have an input in all of that. So it's helped them to see that the vision fulfills what they want as well, that they're part of that, and they can feel that they're what they say really is something that matters to the company. And it's being consistent when you do that. Don't just do it once a year to do it and say, well, we'll ask them about the values for now to get involved. Constantly do that. Every month, if you have a team meeting, have a meeting with them that allows them to have their say. And the last bit of that really would be it's providing the right support for them and provide a support that's both, I said, motivational and emotional. Because if you've got that, it helps you to actually have them feel rewarded for what they do. It offers a support, a mentoring system maybe for them as well. Support them emotionally, regulate their emotions. People have troubles personally as well as professionally. Be there for them so they know when they come in that they can talk to you about it. They're not trying to go in and trying to work when they're carrying all this baggage, maybe from someone at home it's worrying them, because they will not do the job right. They will not be productive. But more than that, if they're not supported in the right way, they can end up leaving and you lose them. And as I think being at the all these 3 points there are to prevent, which I know a lot of recruitment companies have talked over the last couple of years, called the Great Resignation, because people have been walking because they don't feel valued, don't feel supported, like I've said there. But I hate that term because resignation sounds like they're giving up. But the people are not. They're walking because you've gave up. You're not doing the right things for them. It's not them that's doing it. So it shouldn't be that the Great Resignation should be called. But what it should be is it should be we should be looking at it as a recruitment and retention drive is how much would it cost you if you don't do those 3 things to replace one of your members of staff? And I don't just mean the recruitment fee. I mean, how do you replace all the um, experience they've built up in it? How do you replace someone who knows how you think and work? How do you replace that camaraderie they've got with the members of the team? If you take one chain out of that, one link out of that chain, like a chain in a bike, you take the link out of it, the chain, the bike doesn't work, does it? It's the same with a team if you do that. So how can you look at those 3 things I've just said? You'll have a more productive, a happier, healthier, more fulfilled workforce. And that means that you're going to have less attrition, less absence, and making more money. It's a win-win situation for everybody.
Some good points there, Tony, and especially, I mean, I've just dropped Tony's website into the chat area. If it's not on LinkedIn, I'll share that later on, but it's definitely on the YouTube channel, Revitalise Networking as well. But number one, understanding what motivates you and your team. Number two, creating a vision that you and your team are motivated with. And thirdly, most importantly, is support the
Yep.
structure for your team that's around you, because you're looking to support them to make sure they stay with you and you keep them motivated in there. And I think there's a lot of recruiters and HR companies who'll be shouting at the screen of what you just mentioned there as well, in a good way, a positive fact of these are real key three areas for the business as well, and moving forward.
Yeah, it's all about culture, and that's what people don't understand. It's building the right culture. People will stay. You don't have the right culture, people will walk. They call it a toxic culture. If you're not there, there's a lot of things people say with all these different stats. I'm just going to write from Deloitte. I know it's done one as well. And had people saying that they were leaving because of the bosses rather than because of the job, because they're just not valued, not treated the right way. And yeah, it's so important. If you want to keep the talent that you have within your workforce, do those three things and you'll keep them. And your work will keep this back. Your work will keep scaling. It'll keep moving up as well.
Yeah. Tony, thanks very much for sharing those with us. I think they're great. Looking at the motivational, emotional, but also you mentioned the holistic intelligence that's in there as well. Thank you for sharing that. And we will add those into the social posts later on if they're not in there just yet. Um, we talk about learnings and we talked about personal development. We talk about not just the business, but how do you take time out, and how much time, or what are your biggest learnings in your personal development? Is it books? Is it audio? I mean, what do you do to take time out to give you time? Because we talked about that early on.
Yeah, I think for me, I've always been an avid reader since I was a child. I love books. Um, I've had every Kindle I think that's come out. Each time there's a new one come out, I've got a new Kindle because I've got so many books on, even the older ones. But funny enough, I did say to my wife at the weekend when we were out, I miss sometimes just having a hardback book in my hand. Kindle's great, but just the feeling of that, just because Richard been on it, just reminded me of that, is when I'm saying the other day, is that you sometimes that feeling you have, or even the smell of a new book when you're sitting up, it's like the anticipation. You can't wait. You can't get the same with a Kindle because you don't really see it the same. A beautiful cover, even the way the book's bound, open it up, you can't wait to get into it. But there is times then when you don't always have time for that, so the Audible comes in. I love podcasts. I learn a lot from them, and I love just listening to books on Audible as well. Sometimes, especially if I was trained at that, it's a great thing to do for the motivational speak. Just coming in, have that in your ear as well. But the book side of it, I mean, I was reading the book again now, How to Influence People. It was a book. It was Dean, oh God, I just want Carnegie. Dale Carnegie wrote it, and it's probably about 30, 40, maybe even at 50 years old. It's How to Make Friends and Influence People. And it's such a fantastic book on business, but also personal development. There's so many little golden nuggets that's in that book. And it was quite strange when I put it out recently that people were actually saying, I put a picture of it and I was reading it because they had all these modern books people had. I went, this one's been around. I can't remember exactly when it came out, but I'm guessing it's probably, I think it was actually now about 70 years ago, 60, 70 years ago it came out. It's been revamped several times, but it's an amazing book just for simple little techniques, simple little things you can do about making people come together and working together. It's fantastic for that. And a modern one that I like for in audio is Atomic Habits with James Clear. There's so many great nuggets in that book. One thing that I use a lot from clients in it is the 1%. If you do 1% more each day, and then you keep doing it, how much you move forward, how much you gain. That's all you have to do to keep moving forward. And it just reminds me of a saying. There's a great Chinese philosopher called Lao Tzu who said that every journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step. And all these self-development books, all the ones that I read, it's the same thing. They've just, as if they've taken that saying and turned it into different ways of doing it. But that's what the amazing thing is where it's all the same. For anybody who wants to do any sort of development, where it's fitness, mentally remember, as well as physically, you need both. Where it's, and these people want to lose weight, whatever you want to do, always remember all you have to do is take one step each day and you're still moving forward. So never be hard on yourself what you're doing. As long as you're doing something, you're always learning. And that old saying goes with the day you stop learning, you stop living. That's when I'll stop learning.
Every day is a learning day, Tony.
Yep, every single day. You always learn something.
No matter how old we get, and we're walking around, however we are at 80 or 90 years old, every day will be a learning day on there as well. So, some great books. I'll put those in the recommendation. Atomic Habits, Tony mentioned as well,
Yeah.
and How to Make Friends and Influence People. Some good book recommendations there from Tony. So, thanks for sharing that with us. I think there's nothing better, and I agree with you, having a hardback book. I mean, I shouldn't say this because I might get cold, but I like to get a highlight. And when I used to travel around a lot, if I had a hardback book, I used to make notes in it. I used to highlight in it. I used to use it as a reference guide, go back into the book. There's nothing better than flicking through the pages and going back to something that you really found interesting and reading it again and keeping it in your mind. And I did it a lot with my sales team, or did it myself personally for my own personal development. Yeah, nothing better than you just crack that spine open and you just start opening up even further. And
Well, see, I'm different for you that way. I know people say that to me. I'm very particular about the books. I've got them all behind me now. I've got a big cupboard here with them, and I've got another one below me. And I use post-its, so I don't damage the books. I
okay,
stick post-its in and put notes in it.
damage.
Put them work.
Okay,
So it's one of those things. I've all been the same, and I don't know, maybe because comes from the background I did as a kid, not being able to afford much like that, is you had to look after whatever you had. And I
yeah.
think it's always stayed in me since that. It's just because I think I can always see all the effort I put in to do that book, that I want to keep it good. So I do it. Even my university books, I'm probably the only university student who's not got one word written in a book. It's all post-its. It's in their book. I've still got it. And everybody else is writing on it. I don't.
Well, I've got to say though, one is that I do use. It's only been in one book I've done in my time, so I have to stand corrected on that. It's only one book I did, but I've never done it ever since. So I put my hands up on that one. Yeah, Richard should put in there. Highlighters, broken spines. What works for you? Thanks, Richard, for
That's it.
sharing that in there.
Yeah, it's when whatever works for anybody, you do it. That's on it. And that's what I said, even with the audio, people say, I couldn't do that. Try it. You'll find this
Yeah,
actually, though you say you won't do it, you'll love it, because there's bits when you read, you don't take everything in when you read. That's just the way humans are. It all goes in, but only
yeah.
certain bits do. But for some reason, subliminally, when we're hearing something, we might not even realise we're doing it, we're picking things up more. So it's also a great way of doing that, is have a combination of the two.
I love my Audible. I use my Audible when I'm driving the car. You've got
Mm.
that. A lot of people can't do that, drive and listen at the same time or listen to music. But I like listening to books because I think of ideas in that journey. And then when I get to the end of the journey, I've got a little notebook in the car, just write it down. So I know it's somewhere that it just sticks in your mind. I think even when you go for a jog or a walk, just put the headphones in and just listen to it,
Yeah,
and
I'm saying
take
I've got a
something
wee
away.
dictaphone. I could use my phone, people say, but I've got a wee tiny dictaphone. It literally fits in my hand. You don't even notice it's there. It's that
Old
small.
school.
And it's the
Old
same.
school.
Yeah, I just do that and say some words into that. Go back and listen to it later and go, that'll do as a post, or that'll do for my client, or I'll do it. And you try to explain it, where'd you get these ideas from? You wouldn't believe me if I told you. It's just, I commit all these things, no matter what I'm doing, I've got that thing there. I just do it, write things down.
I've got to admit, I've got a dictaphone myself as well. I've still got old school with a little microphone on top of it. I just hold it, and that
Yeah,
stays in
that's
my
it.
bag
You
all
just
the
do it,
time.
and nobody even knows. I know people saying you could do it with your phone. I even thinking that's getting voice notes in the phone, but it's just the feel of it is so small. It's just there. I
Right.
just nobody sees what I'm doing. It's great.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thanks, Tony. Thanks for sharing that with us. Um, what's next for you? We've talked a lot about your business. We've shared some great top tips, etc. But we talk about the next steps. What's the next 6 months looking like for you at the moment? What is your next goal or
Um,
objective you want to achieve?
it's a transition period for me. I said that I've been working mostly with new business owners since I left the bank, and I love that, and I won't stop that. In fact, I've got a little collaboration going on with someone as well, another member of RBC,
Yeah,
where
yeah.
we help new business owners with different topics each month. And we also have a little academy they can go into for a year as well, to help them get a group run of people now about in the same position as them to move up. So it's allowing me to keep doing that while transitioning to what I want to do more, is working more with the CEOs and the leaders and the leadership teams. Because I've been asked so many times to work with people, can you help them, new managers and things? I said, why not turn them into a leader rather than a manager? And people don't always understand the difference. And I said, what you want to have now, and what for me is so important, is to have thought leaders of the future being built just now. Everybody who comes in is learning any of these things. Like, one, teamwork should learn how to lead. And lead does not mean you stand at the front and do everything for everybody else. It's you measured on how well your team does, not how well you do. That's a great leader. How the team and how you've developed your team and doing it, that's how you should be measured. But having the tools and the right resources to do that, a lot of managers don't. And you'll know it's something I talk about a lot is the umbilical business cord. And
Yes.
that's because a lot of managers cannot, leaders, businesses at the moment, business leaders can't let go. And they have this cord that's stuck because it's the business like their baby. So I just help them to cut that, release that, work on them. What do they want to do now? But then work with a team so that they feel comfortable that that team is ready to take over the day-to-day roles. So building an infrastructure within the team. So within the company, we've got an infrastructure here in managers, how they're going to work, an aspiring thing in as well, so that people can see there is places you can move up within it, you can develop, and getting them into a position where they understand that that's what's important part of their role should be to develop the staff and make sure that they learn. And it's never worry if someone knows something better than you know or more than you know, because you're there to guide them to do that and get as far as they can. I said, and that's the amazing part of it. So that's what I want to do more of is getting more, working more with the leaders to build their own leaders, their thought leaders of the future.
Brilliant, Tony. I love that. I love that sort of focus on the leaders of the future. Love that one. But here's a question for you that we always like to wrap these sessions or
Mhm.
these weekly calls up with as well. What is a great business introduction for you? Who would be a great business intro for you today? If someone's listening in, what would you say to them? How can they help you?
A small to medium sized business who's been going for approximately 5 years. Around about that time, they normally get to a point where the leaders in the business, whether it's the directors, whatever they want to call themselves, are a position that they not sure what to do. The business might have to scale, but where do they fit into that? What I've just said, the idea then is for me is to go in is get them to allow them to have the life that they always chose to lead. That's why they set the business up and help them to get their teams then to actually take over that side of the business, the day to day, which allows them to concentrate on what they're good at.
And would that be a certain demographic or a certain area for you?
No, because we just mentioned earlier, because being online, I can work with anyone, anywhere in the world.
Brilliant. I've actually popped that straight in the chat area for everybody as well. So you can see there, business intro for Tony is 5 to 6 years, SME business owners who are global coverage for global as well. I think
Yeah,
that's a
and
great.
really looking to scale because they feel a bit stale. They're stuck at a certain point. They don't really know where they're going. Get there so we can get them in that direction, getting them doing, have the life they choose to have. That's the important bit as they set a business up for a reason. Get them to have the life they choose to have, but getting an infrastructure in the business ready that the people there can take over that day-to-day running of that business.
Absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much, Tony. And it's been an absolute pleasure catching up with you this afternoon to really find out where you are at the minute, where your businesses came from, and really taking a deeper dive in how you can help people in sharing some of those top tips. Thank you so much.
No, it's brilliant, and thank you for all of it. And it is an amazing part. I know I'm one of the biggest sort of advocates of RBC, but if anybody is listening, no shit it is. Come and join the RBC because this is only one aspect of this having league and through these things. There is so much to offer for business owners, and I keep saying about people being stuck in this place. You don't get stuck. There's so many other people always willing to help. So thank you for allowing me to come along and have a chat with you about this today. I appreciate it.
You're more than welcome, Tony. Thank you for sharing that with everybody as well. And thank you so much to everybody who's been watching and listening, to Richard and a couple of LinkedIn users, Richard Hagan, that's on there as well. Thank you for joining us and thank you for sharing your comments. If you got any questions, I've popped, as I said earlier, Tony's web link. That's actually in the chat area just now. And it will be in the LinkedIn comments later on when we go into that sort of later on today or first thing tomorrow morning. As always, if you got any questions, I would highly recommend that you reach out to Tony and let's book in a virtual cup of coffee, have a chat together. You never know where an opportunity will arise if you don't have a conversation. Those
Mhm.
conversations can open up collaborations and opportunities for you in business. Networking is so much more than just the sale in the room. It's about the resources that's available to you and the support structure that you have around from you. Join us next week live at 5 on LinkedIn Live, where I'll be welcoming along Razvan Syed, who's from the award-winning Sword Finance and Investments. That's next Tuesday at 5 o'clock. So we're looking forward to delving into the conversation with Razvan. But for myself and from Tony, thanks very much, everybody. Have a great afternoon and a phenomenal week ahead, everybody. Thanks again. Say goodbye,
Thank you,
Tony.
everybody. Thank you, Richard. Thank you.
See you soon. Take care, everybody.